There's a hunger behind your ribs, not for food, not for love, but for escape. It hums quietly under every distraction, every impulse, every promise that this next fix will finally bring peace. A cigarette, a scroll, a drink, a lie, each one a small prayer whispered to the gods of relief. And when it works, when the noise fades and your body melts for a few brief minutes, you almost believe you found peace. But then the silence returns, and with it comes the hollowness, the quiet humiliation of knowing you traded a piece of yourself for another round of temporary numbness. You've promised to stop. You've bargained with yourself 100 times. You've sworn that tomorrow you'll be stronger, clearer, better. But tomorrow arrives dressed like today, and you already know how the day ends. Because the craving isn't about the thing. It's about the absence, the hole behind the habit, the ache you never learned to name. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That's what addiction is, the art of not facing yourself. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere inside you, something is still bleeding and you've run out of ways to stop the sound. The cruel trick is that every escape becomes a leash. What begins as comfort ends as confinement, and the longer you run from the dark, the more the dark begins to follow. The split self. There are two of you living in the same body. One wants transformation, the other wants rest. One swears it's time to change, the other whispers that change is too dangerous. And every day you oscillate between these two selves, wondering why you can't just get it together. You wake up as the seeker, fall asleep as the avoider. And somewhere between morning and night, the lines blur until you can't tell who's steering anymore. Jung called this possession, when the unconscious takes the wheel and drives your life while you watch from the passenger seat. It feels like choice, but it isn't. It's memory wearing your face. Think about it. The moment you swear you're done, and still your hands move, your mouth opens, your mind makes excuses. That's not stupidity, it's trance. Addiction is a ritual of control, an attempt to manage chaos through repetition. It's the body's way of saying, if I can't change the world, I'll at least control the way I feel for a moment. But that moment always costs more than it gives, because what the protector inside you wants most isn't relief, it's reassurance. Reassurance that you're safe enough to exist without armor. And until you give it that, it will keep choosing sedation over consciousness. You don't need more willpower, you need reconciliation. The protector in disguise. Addiction isn't a villain, it's an overworked guardian. It was born the day you learned that feeling too much could destroy you. Maybe it happened in childhood, the day your excitement was mocked, or your pain ignored, or your effort dismissed. Maybe you learned that being seen was dangerous, that showing emotion was weakness, that silence was safety. So you built a small fortress inside yourself, and each habit you later called bad was originally a wall, a way to survive the storm. That's why when people tell you to just stop, it feels impossible, because they're asking you to abandon the one thing that kept you alive when no one else did. But survival and freedom are not the same. Survival keeps you breathing. Freedom lets you live. The protector within you still thinks it's saving your life. It doesn't realize the threat is gone. It doesn't know you've grown. And until you face it, not as an enemy, but as a relic of who you once were, you'll keep mistaking your defense mechanisms for your personality. You are not the craving, you were the one who inherited it. The shadow's bargain. Every urge carries a message. Every compulsion hides a truth. The problem isn't that you crave too much, it's that you listen too little. The shadow speaks in symbols, not logic. It doesn't say, I'm lonely. It says, open the app. It doesn't say, I'm scared. It says, pour the drink. It doesn't say, I'm lost. It says, run. And because you've never been taught to translate those symbols, you fight them. You call them weakness, sin, failure. You try to kill what's trying to communicate. But the shadow doesn't die. It waits. It waits for the next quiet moment, the next heartbreak, the next long night. And then it speaks again, louder this time. Jung warned that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He was right, because to truly accept yourself, you have to stop pretending that the craving is separate from you. You have to admit that the monster and the man share the same heartbeat. Addiction isn't the opposite of you. It's the part that refused to give up on feeling something, anything, when the rest of you went numb. The pain beneath it is sacred. It's proof that you're still alive. The work isn't to silence the shadow, but to invite it in and ask, what are you trying to tell me? The answer will hurt, but it will also heal. The origin scene. Close your eyes for a moment and go back to the first time you felt powerless, the first time the world demanded strength you didn't yet have. Maybe it was a room full of shouting voices. Maybe it was silence so heavy it became its own kind of violence. Maybe it was the feeling of being invisible when you needed to be seen. And in that moment, you found something that worked, a distraction, a sweetness, a secret. Something small that made the ache bearable. It was never about pleasure, it was about anesthesia. You didn't know it then, but that was the birth of the pattern. Pain leads to relief, relief leads to shame, shame leads to promises, and the promises always lead back to pain. Over the years, that loop became identity. You stopped asking who you were outside of it. You became the cycle itself. But here's the truth most people never hear. You can't hate your way out of an addiction that was built from self-protection. You have to love yourself enough to outgrow it. The shadow doesn't dissolve under punishment. It dissolves under presence, and presence begins the moment you stop looking away. The mirror moment. There's a moment that decides everything. It's not dramatic. There's no music cue. It's quiet, the breath before the relapse, the half second where you could still turn back. You feel it. The pulse, the tremor, the whisper. The familiar script begins. You deserve this. Just once. You'll start over tomorrow. But if in that instant you can stop and notice, you've already changed the ending. Because the body can't lie when awareness enters the room. The craving that once felt infinite suddenly reveals its shape. It's not a monster, it's a wave. It rises, peaks, and passes, always. You don't conquer it, you outlast it. Every time you pause long enough to watch the wave instead of riding it, something rewires inside you. The protector loses a fraction of its control. The seeker gains a fraction of its strength, and those fractions accumulate. Until one day, the pause becomes natural. The wave rises, and you breathe. It falls, and you're still standing. That's the first taste of freedom. Not absence of craving, but the presence of choice. The false cure. The world loves quick fixes. It will sell you routines, affirmations, detoxes, and 10-day resets, all promising to rebuild your life before breakfast. But the truth is less glamorous. You can't hack your way out of a wound you haven't felt. Motivation, willpower, punishment, they all come from the same misunderstanding, that the problem is behavior. It's not. It's belonging. You don't relapse because you're careless. You relapse because for a moment, the craving feels like home. Because somewhere inside, you still believe you're only safe when you're numb. That belief won't break under force. It will dissolve under truth. Jung wrote that, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness isn't there to destroy you, it's there to be understood, to be seen. And once you truly see it, not as sin but as story, it begins to lose its grip. The alchemy of desire. The alchemists believed that even poison could become medicine if faced with awareness. Jung took that ancient idea and gave it psychological form. He saw that our darkest urges aren't enemies to be slain, but raw materials for transformation. Every craving is energy, misdirected, misunderstood, but still sacred. It's the life force asking to move through you in the only language it knows. When you try to suppress it, that energy stagnates. It becomes anxiety, restlessness, guilt. But when you learn to meet it consciously, to breathe into it, to name it, to ask what it wants, you reclaim the very power that once controlled you. Think of the moment an urge appears. The pulse quickens, the mouth dries, the mind narrows to a single thought. I need it. Pause right there. That feeling isn't weakness, it's potential condensed into urgency. If you can stay with it, not act on it, but feel it fully, the heat turns into light. The craving says, move. You answer, I'm listening. And suddenly, the energy that used to destroy you becomes fuel. Fuel for creation, reflection, movement, connection. This is the first act of inner alchemy, transforming compulsion into choice. You begin to see the pattern for what it is, not a curse, but a ritual. Every ritual hides a meaning. Every habit hides a need. Once you read the language beneath it, you stop being its servant and become its interpreter. That's the hidden promise of addiction. The same intensity that drove you to escape can drive you to awaken. The conversation with the shadow. By now you've realized that recovery isn't a battle, it's a dialogue. Every day the shadow will come knocking, dressed as temptation. You'll feel the same tug, the same whisper that says, just one more time. But now you know to pause, to open the door slowly and ask, what do you need from me today? Maybe it needs rest, maybe it needs honesty. Maybe it needs you to finally admit that you're lonely, not lazy, that what you call addiction is really unexpressed grief. The more often you listen, the quieter it becomes, because what's acknowledged doesn't have to shout. You might think listening gives it power. It doesn't. Listening returns the power to you. Jung called this process integration. He said that the shadow, once made conscious, loses its destructive force and becomes a source of renewal. That's the paradox. The same energy that once kept you chained can now carry you forward. So, the next time the urge rises, remember, this isn't relapse, it's communication. The question isn't, how do I silence it? It's, what truth is trying to reach me through this discomfort? Because that's where healing lives, not in avoidance, but in understanding. The long descent. You don't transform in a single revelation. You descend slowly, repeatedly. At first it feels endless. The same thoughts, the same mistakes, the same shame looping like a broken film reel. You'll want to quit. You'll think nothing's changing. But the descent is necessary because each layer you revisit carries another fragment of the self you abandoned. You start noticing moments others don't see, the tremor before the impulse, the way guilt sits differently in the body than grief, the tiny flicker of calm when you breathe instead of obey. These details mean you're waking up. It's not glamorous work. No one applauds awareness. There's no milestone to post, no medal for surviving a craving in silence. But this is how the psyche rebuilds, quietly, invisibly, one honest moment at a time. And then, without warning, something shifts. The habit that once ruled you begins to feel foreign, almost absurd. as if it belongs to another life. You start to remember what it's like to choose. That's the real miracle, not perfection, but presence. The integration. Integration is where the myth of recovery ends and real life begins. Because there's no finish line, only relationship. You will always have a shadow, it will always speak. But now, it speaks to an adult, not a frightened child. You'll feel cravings still, but they'll sound different. Less like commands, more like invitations. You'll sense the split selves, the seeker and the protector, learning to share the same space. And for the first time, you'll realize they were never opposites. They were always parts of the same whole, trying to find each other again. Jung wrote that, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." Wholeness isn't purity, it's harmony between the dark and the light. That's what freedom really means. Not that the darkness disappears, but that it no longer defines you. You'll notice small miracles. The craving comes and you breathe. The guilt arrives and you forgive. The emptiness surfaces and you sit beside it instead of running. That's integration. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. The shadow becomes a companion, and you, at last, become trustworthy to yourself. The slow resurrection. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like exhale. It's the morning you wake up clear-headed and don't immediately crave distraction. It's the night you sit in silence and realize you're not lonely. You're alive. It's the moment someone else's chaos no longer pulls you off center. That's resurrection, the slow return of your own soul. It's subtle at first. Life still hurts. You still flinch when the past brushes against the present. But somewhere inside, there's a steady pulse that wasn't there before. The pulse of someone who no longer runs. And as that pulse grows stronger, the meaning of time changes. You stop counting days since your last mistake and start counting moments of awareness instead. Each one becomes a brick in a new foundation, evidence that you are not the story you once believed. Jung said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." You've been to hell. You've met its silence. And because of that, your roots can now hold the weight of something divine. This is not recovery. This is rebirth. The covenant with time. Every minute of awareness is a covenant. When you stay present through discomfort, you're signing an invisible contract with yourself. I will not abandon me again. Each fulfilled promise, each moment you breathe instead of break, becomes evidence. And every piece of evidence shapes identity. Identity, repeated through time, becomes destiny. You're teaching your nervous system what safety actually feels like. Not the numbing calm of escape, but the quiet steadiness of truth. It's hard at first. The body resists. The old reflexes scream. But time is patient, and it always rewards alignment. You'll see. The more hours you spend in awareness, the less grip the old ritual has. Not because it vanished, but because it no longer defines you. Time doesn't pass, it accumulates, and what you practice becomes who you are. The farewell to the old self. There's one final act, and it isn't about control, it's about grief. To move forward, you must bury someone, not with shame, but with honor. The self who used to break promises, who needed the addiction to feel safe, he wasn't evil, he was necessary. He kept you alive through seasons you weren't equipped to survive, but he can't come with you now. So you thank him, you tell him the truth, you did your job, I'm safe now, you can rest. And as you say it, you'll feel something loosen in the chest, not pain, release. Because the self you're becoming doesn't need saving anymore. He just needs space to live. That's the moment the protector bows and joins the light. Not gone, integrated. And when that happens, the war ends. The sovereign self. Here's where all of this leads. One day the craving will return, like it always does. But when it does, something inside you will simply nod. You'll feel it, name it, and let it pass. No fear, no shame, no story. Because you'll know now that the shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher. And mastery is not control, it's understanding. That's sovereignty, the quiet authority of a person who has finally made peace with their own depths. The world will still tempt you to forget. Screens will glow, bottles will gleam, comfort will whisper its rehearsed promises, but you'll see through them. Because once you've looked into the mirror of your shadow and survived, nothing external can hold the same power again. You will walk through life with a new gravity, not heavy, but anchored. You'll speak less and mean more. You'll stop seeking permission to exist. And in every small act of awareness, you'll feel the pulse of your own redemption. You were never broken, you were divided, and now, finally, you are whole.